the links to join the channel here over at SubScribe. Now has a article tier over there. So why Rings of Power didn't work and why the Amazon Studios Girl Boss was pushed out after the failures Rings of Power and James Bond. It's the ultimate hero's journey, the eternal battle of good versus evil, shining through the lens of English folklore. I don't know if it's the best fantasy story ever written. All I can say is the best that I've ever read, the four books that make up the main story. And the books that he referenced when he does interviews, the fantasy that inspired some of this stuff, in fact, where he took some of the words and place settings from, you go back and read some of them, and they're just too fantastic. They're very flowery, very magical. Where Tolkien told the story, it was kind of mostly an action adventure, kind of like who's that guy? Terry Pratchett did that too, where he's got a magical background setting, but there's not a whole lot of magic because it's too much MacGuffin, God in the machine type of painting yourself in the corner and then having the God come down and rescue you because you're like, that's magic. So there's not a whole lot of plots logically making sense. So I think this is a fundamental schism between nationalism and globalism. The idea that people and races are different, and for however you want to use that term, ethnicity, race, whatever, people and tribes are not fungible. A lesson that the West has unfortunately learned 40 years too late. So think of these like a garden orb weaver at the center of her web. All the connection points, the vibrations and the strings of the wind, prey insects, potential suitors, all the pieces that go into the web spider system, the delicate and strong tensile properties that tell the spider it's dinner time, or the bug is too big and dangerous, so the spider actually cuts it loose and repairs the web. All those interconnections of the surrounding flora and fauna that go up into a garden orb weaver. You can watch that spider for months if she likes her position. Every piece evolved to work perfectly to kill mosquitoes. And what Hollywood does is come along, plus amount of cocaine, and start replacing that silk with plastic, and they expect the system to work. It kind of reminds me of like the T and the BLT people. It's like, what are you talking about? All if they identify as something, they are that thing. It's like a piece of plastic can identify as a web. It's not the majestic beauty that is a woman. So Lord of the Rings worked because Tolkien set it in fantasy Europe based on European folklore, mythology, and Christianity. I just hope that the trans fad is on its way out. It arose from the soil of his childhood and life experience with other English people, and of course World War One. Then the different characters were based on the other races of Europe, and we don't have to get caught up in semantics. For the purpose of the story, you can see the groups as different races works because the Scandinavians are different from the Irish or English, but then when you step back and look at them, you see that they're pretty well closely connected as part of something greater. But the history of Europe and Britain that led to Tolkien, all those little connection pieces created something that was uniquely English and connected to the greater Europe. The European race made up of all these sub-ethnicities, which triggers the left when we see ourselves as a people, but that's good because they sterilize children and they're demons. They cheer Sodom, so their jeers mean little. So you've got this Jaguar V12 engine of a story where everything is moving together in perfect harmony, carries the story along, and even the story itself is white. It has characters and values that have evolved from the collective European people. Non-European people in the story don't fit. Actually, black female James Bond sidekick character, I guess they were kind of grooming her for the role, is kind of this pretty much similar argument against why it just doesn't work. Because non-white diversity didn't build the story, an Englishman did. And the British have created probably the most popular stories on Earth. I mean, part of the thing is that we're speaking the language because of it. The stories only work when it's based on white people because of the countless characteristics of the European people, the things that grant it verisimilitude. So when you read the books or saw the Peter Jackson movies, everything all made sense. The characters acted in ways that made sense to the audience. The story has these different tribes and they're united against the common enemy. And the tribes logically look like tribes have always looked like, a group of one people. Some of the hobbits might be supposed to represent Scottish or Irish, but the willing suspension of disbelief worked because the fictional characters also look like they belong together. Where the actors and the characters they play obviously have to match up. The book or movie didn't have black or Chinese people in an English story because not only are they not English, they're very different. They can't create Lord of the Rings, and the evidence is, and that's not to say they can't create good stories, but they didn't create Lord of the Rings because they didn't. Tolkien did. And he was such a god among mortal storytellers that Amazon had to use his story for propaganda. And there's another kind of a side argument that it's part of the humiliation ritual of a conquered people who won't fight back. This J. Campbell book on Occidental mythology, it's one of 4 in a series, and it opens up by explaining the different worldviews between the Western pantheons and systems, which he includes as Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam for the Western, and then the various pagan systems, which are the based Western belief system, and Christianity has been adopted. And I think he considers the division between West and East to be Iran. But the structure is man and God, or the gods. It's 2 discrete entities, and all that follows from that belief. Then compared to the East, you've got India and the Far East. The religion is very different. Roughly, very roughly, it's man attaining some greater understanding and becoming godlike. Yes, I know it's impossible to try to sum 4 books up. He does Occidental, Oriental, like civilized man's religion, and then some kind of world religion conclusion. You can't sum up 1,000 pages in a paragraph, but the point is the worldviews and the civilizations that arise from it are different. And this is why diversity in storytelling that is beyond a shallow approach doesn't work. Lord of the Rings, where all these different tribes work together to fight some threat, that only works when the hobbits are all collections of the sub-ethnicities within the greater whole. So when you include Afro-Hobbits or Indians or Asians in the story, the reader subconsciously views them as the enemy within because they're visibly different. They would be on the side of Mordor. It takes the motivation out of the story. If the fair-skinned hobbits are already being replaced by dark ones, then that's the war within your gates. Because if you're not fighting to maintain your nation, then you've already lost. Your nation is your tribe, the Natal. Like, what are you conserving? It's the confusion between the concepts of civic versus ethno-nationalism. Because there is no civic nationalism. There's no civic nation. And ethno-nationalism is redundant. It shows the degree of media propaganda since about 1960, or maybe even kind of World War II, that people just parrot things they hear without thinking about it. When you see dark elves and hobbits, the viewer is wondering, what are they fighting for? Because it looks like they already lost, that they've been conquered. Because the actors have connections to ideas and things, and the goal of a show should not be to get in the way of the story by including elements that take the viewer out of the story. The Hobbits might be based on the British and the 4 subgroups within, but there are no black, Indian, or Chinese British, not now or when the story was written. There were some living there, but they're not of the people. They're not of the tribe. They're weak links because they have interests adverse to the natives. Words need to matter, but globalists try to control the language to manipulate naive people with suicidal altruism. It's like when the Ukraine war kicked off. We'll say all the non-Europeans immediately left the country. They're there for business. They're not there to sacrifice for the country. So the natives go to war to die for Zelensky, who himself is not a native European. They're all kind of fair weather friends, parasites there to feed off the native people and then just move on to Britain to be parasites there and get welfare and whatnot. The media cover these people fleeing Ukraine, calling them refugees, but never from the perspective of them as parasites. And when the native Ukrainians are buried in the fields, Zelensky will just import more Africans to replace them. So that in the real world, the actual events that happened in the past 4 years, that's what happened. But when you see Rings of Power and various shows like it, which is basically everything in the past 10 years, you get this globalist fantasy world where the non-natives and natives are all together in one happy family. The viewer subconsciously knows it doesn't make sense. Amazon has made this evil mirror image world to brainwash the viewer into thinking diversity is actually a positive instead of genocide. The viewer knows he's watching globalist propaganda. You're subconsciously asking, why are there Euro, Afro, Asian, Indian hobbits all together? The East Asians and Indians are physically aliens, but so is their pantheon and beliefs. They're not the Western beliefs of the Euro-paganism or adopted Christianity, which came later, which both still share the belief of man and God, not man becomes God. Even some of the African beliefs are closer to Western because they have nature-based beliefs, demons and various witch doctors, medicine men, and spiritualism to act as the go-between between man and God. The equivalent to pagan or Christian priests. People the tribe sets aside to sort of be the PhD in religion, so the rest of the tribe doesn't have to ponder that orb all the time and be religious experts. You can just have someone kind of dumb it down for you a little bit, simplify the process. But still, even the African religious practice is alien, and it's not European or for the hobbits. And the counter argument, touch grass, my guy, is it's just they always go like, it doesn't matter. It's like, well, if it didn't matter, then you wouldn't have changed it. If it didn't matter, you wouldn't be on Twitter responding. Clearly, it matters quite a bit for Amazon to spend $700-800 million on the story, and they're probably going to lose, I'll guess, $200 million on it, because I think they've already made 360 on it. And how that math actually works out, I'm just going to guess that, they're not going to suddenly get a boom in the fourth and fifth season. I mean, you never know, but so except it's not Amazon's fiction, it's Tolkien's. And the Amazon, you could just make movies that don't suck. There's an article in Newsweek or something about theaters are trying to find a way to bring people back to the theater and with like alcohol and weed and all these kind of other things, and other than just simply changing the product of the movie. That's a bridge too far for them. You're asking the impossible if you want them to fix the stories. Like, can you just stop with this heavy-handed anti-white propaganda and just make movies as if you didn't hate people of European descent, as if you weren't just making Pravda propaganda endlessly. Like that's not going to happen. So we're going to have weed instead. The viewer knows the different races have interests adverse to each other. So seeing them together on screen is waiting for a conflict to happen. SJWs would say, well, assume they all share the same beliefs. But then why do they visibly look different? And there's no good answer for their presence other than it's globalist propaganda using Tolkien to brainwash the viewer into accepting globalism. Doesn't anyone think how odd, how it's odd how ubiquitous this race-swapping propaganda has become, as if they're programming people to accept their own genocide, and it's racist to resist. The viewer knows something is wrong on screen, and obviously in the West. Rings of Power is selling a story that kind of reminds me of the Transformers movies, where it's good for what it is. It's action, it's nice sets, it's good CGIs, it's explosions in the background, it's pretty people, but it doesn't mean anything. It's art by AI. When you start looking closely at AI images, it's AI is kind of deeply creepy. It's like some demon is trying to communicate from beyond the realms or something. It's just that the images are just people are moving and gesturing. They're making facial expressions and moving again. The background changes, but you listen to the dialogue and it's words that sound English but are actually meaningless. There's a Italian song on YouTube you can find, and in fact, if you just search for the Italian song, it'll come up. It's a guy who doesn't speak English, but he made a rock song or a pop song in the 70s that sounds vaguely English. So it vaguely looks like one side versus another, but the sides are morphing into each other when they turn around. It is the worst bread and circuses soy slop. It's so shallow that it's pointless. The Barbie blue paper ocean, if you saw that that Barbie movie with Margot Robbie where they walk out on the ocean. The real Lord of the Rings makes sense because it has depth sufficient to be translated into different languages. The characters connected to the people who connect to the land and the religion, and people are not fungible. When you take a story that's tied to the European people from an English writer and swap out the actual European people, those godlike creatures that made this all possible, a story doesn't make sense anymore. Anyway, and the thing is, it's an insult to the audience. So Amazon says that they're just tightening up at the executive level because the show is obviously not selling as well as it should. So they can just streamline the position a bit, which means she got fired. But is it really her fault for doing kind of what they told her to do? I assume, like all this, when this happens, that this is what Amazon wanted, or when Disney goes through the same thing. So it doesn't make sense to me when these people all get together, they get things approved, and they know, like something like the Eternals or Black Adam or Black Widow or Madam Web, the Marvels, like they know the probability of these things that they're going to lose money unless they're just so insanely deep in an echo chamber. See, I don't know. I don't know how deep they're in that echo chamber or how much pharmaceuticals they're doing. But like to get a $300 million movie, like a $200 million movie plus advertising plus reshoots, all to get all this money together, and you go, hey, our experts look at it and they've kind of talked to the audience, and these are movie buffs, movie experts, and they go, yeah, some girl power movie is in current year. People are talking about this kind of stuff on Twitter. There's all these like anti-SJW channels on YouTube. They're very much against it, and not just that, but objectively, when these movies come out, they have a history over the past 5 years of losing money. It's this is a really long odds to make a girl power movie right now. And they go, yeah, let's spend the $330 million and do it anyway. It's like, okay, so somebody at the very, very top has to okay these expenditures of movie plus advertising plus reshoots. It's a substantial amount of money, and they know what the odds are it's not going to fail. But then, they know it's going to fail, and then like when it does, they have to throw somebody under the bus. It's kind of weird. It's like most woke shows have been failing lately. The simple question is, why do you keep making them? That is a great question. One we will not get answered. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.